The dust hung heavy in the air that afternoon in 1867. Inside the cramped trading post, the smell of tobacco, whiskey, and unwashed bodies mixed together. Catherine stood near the back wall, her hands trembling as she watched her husband negotiate with a man who looked like he hadn't bathed in months. Her husband, William, was the kind of man who always had a scheme, always had a plan that would make them rich. But every plan failed. They'd come west 3 years ago with dreams of gold, of land, of a better life. Instead, they'd found nothing but disappointment and William's growing anger. Catherine had lost her parents to sickness on the journey west. She'd married William out of desperation, not love. A woman alone on the frontier had few choices. She needed protection, a roof over her head, food. William had offered those things. She thought it would be enough. She was wrong. Now, watching him count out dried strips of buffalo meat laid on the rough wooden counter, Catherine felt her stomach turn. The hunter across from William grinned, showing brown, broken teeth. His name was Garrett, and he'd been eyeing Catherine since they walked into the trading post an hour ago. "So we got a deal then?" Garrett asked, his voice rough as gravel. William nodded, not even looking back at his wife. "Deal's done. The meat, the pelts, and those bottles there." Catherine's voice came out as a whisper. "William, what are you doing?" He finally turned to her, and the coldness in his eyes made her step back. "What's necessary? Can't feed you no more. Can't afford to keep you. Man's got to do what he's got to do." The world seemed to tilt. Catherine grabbed the wall for support. You can't sell me. I'm your wife. You're a burden," William said flatly. He picked up the bottles of whiskey, tucked them under his arm, and gathered the pelts. "Garrett here needs a woman to cook and clean. You'll be useful to him." Tears burned in Catherine's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these men who watched like this was just another day, just another transaction. The trader behind the counter looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Garrett moved toward her, and Catherine pressed herself against the wall. His smell reached her before he did, a mix of old blood, grease, and something rotten. "Come on now, girl. Won't be so bad. I got a camp about 20 miles north. You'll earn your keep." "Please," Catherine looked past him to William, hating herself for begging. "Please don't do this." William was already walking toward the door. He paused, his back to her. For a moment, Catherine thought he might change his mind. Instead, he said, "Should have had sons. What good's a wife who can't even give me that?" Then he was gone. The trading post fell silent except for the creaking of the wooden boards and someone's breathing. Catherine felt frozen, unable to move, unable to think. This couldn't be happening. Women weren't property, weren't sold like horses or tools. But here, on the edge of the frontier where law was whatever men decided it was, apparently they were. Garrett reached for her arm. "Stop." The voice came from the corner of the room, deep, calm, and carrying a weight of authority that made everyone turn. A Lakota man stepped forward from where he'd been standing in the shadows. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with long black hair and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore both traditional clothing and some pieces traded from white settlers, a mix of two worlds. Behind him stood 2 other Lakota men, younger, watching carefully. The trader straightened up nervously. "Now, Red Cloud, this ain't your business. My name is Mapia Luta, and I am in this place trading same as anyone," the man said in perfect English. "Which makes it my business when I see wrong being done." Garrett's hand dropped from Catherine's arm. "The deal's made. Fair and square." "Fair." Mapia Luta moved closer, and Catherine noticed how everyone seemed to shrink back slightly. Not from fear exactly, but from respect. Or maybe both. A woman is not a buffalo hide. She is not meat to trade. She has voice, has spirit. This is not fair. She's nothing, Garrett spat. Her own husband didn't want her. Then she is free, Mapia Luta said simply. He turned to Garrett. "I will trade you 3 horses for whatever claim you think you have. Good horses, strong and fast, worth more than all the meat and pelts that man gave you." Garrett's eyes widened. 3 horses was a fortune compared to what he'd paid. But his pride warred with his greed. "Why? Why do you care about some white woman?" "Because right is right and wrong is wrong," Mapia Luta answered. "In any language, in any nation. Do you accept?" The trading post held its breath. Catherine watched Garrett's face work through his calculations. Finally, greed won. "Done, but I want to pick the horses. You may look at them outside. My companions will show you." As Garrett left with the other two Lakota men, Catherine remained frozen against the wall. The trader busied himself with organizing bottles that didn't need organizing. The few other people in the post found reasons to slip outside. Mapia Luta approached slowly, keeping distance between them. "What is your name?" "Catherine," she managed to say. "Catherine. My name is Mapia Luta. Some white traders call me Red Cloud, but that is not my name. I am called this because of my connection with horses. I understand them, and they understand me." He paused. "You are free now. That man has no claim. Your husband has no claim. You belong only to yourself." Catherine's legs gave out. She slid down the wall to sit on the dirty floor, and finally the tears came. Great. Shaking sobs that she couldn't control. She'd been treated like an animal, like trash, like nothing, by the man who'd promised to protect her. Mapia Luta crouched down, still keeping a respectful distance. "Where is your family?" "Dead," Catherine choked out. "Parents died on the wagon train. No brothers or sisters. No one. Where will you go?" She looked up at him through her tears. "I don't know. I have nothing. No money, no food, nowhere to go. In the white settlements, a woman alone. A woman whose husband abandoned her." She didn't need to finish. They both knew what happened to women with no protection and no resources. Mapia Luta was quiet for a long moment. Outside, they could hear Garrett examining horses, his voice excited. Finally, the Lakota man spoke. "My village is 3 days' ride from here. You could come there, stay with the grandmother women. They would teach you, help you, give you time to decide what you want to do with your freedom." "Why?" Catherine whispered. "Why would you do this? You don't know me." He met her eyes, and she saw nothing but honesty there. "Because I have a sister. I have a mother. I have seen what men can do when they forget that women are human beings with spirits as strong as any man's. I cannot stop all wrong, but I can stop this one wrong. Today. In this place." Catherine wiped her tears with the back of her hand. She thought about her options. She could try to make it to one of the forts, maybe find work as a laundress. But laundresses at frontier forts lived hard lives, treated poorly, paid little. She could try to find another husband, but what kind of man would marry a woman whose own husband had tried to sell her? Or she could go with this stranger who'd just saved her from a nightmare. Go to a Lakota village, to a people she'd been taught to fear. Everything she'd heard about Indians said they were dangerous, violent, savage. But Mapia Luta had just shown her more humanity than any white man in that trading post, including her own husband. "I'll go," she said quietly. "To your village, if you're sure it's no trouble." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. Catherine hesitated only a moment before taking it. His grip was strong but gentle. "It is no trouble," Mapia Luta said. "We leave when the sun is high tomorrow. Tonight you can sleep in the trading post loft. I will make sure no one bothers you." As Garrett came back inside, satisfied with his horses and eager to leave, Catherine realized something. In the span of an hour, she'd been sold like meat and then freed. She'd lost everything and been offered a chance at something new. She didn't know what waited for her in a Lakota village. She didn't know if she could trust Mapia Luta's kindness. But she knew one thing for certain: she would never, ever let anyone treat her as less than human again. That night, lying in the loft above the trading post, Catherine stared at the rough wooden ceiling and listened to the sounds of the frontier night. Somewhere out there, William was probably drinking his whiskey, not giving her a second thought. Somewhere out there was a life she'd thought she understood. Tomorrow, she would ride toward a life she couldn't even imagine. For the first time since her parents died, Catherine felt something stirring inside her that she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Morning came too quickly. Catherine had barely slept, her mind racing with everything that had happened and everything that might happen. When she climbed down from the loft, her body ached and her eyes felt heavy, but there was no time for rest. Mapia Luta was already outside with his companions and the horses. In the daylight, Catherine could see him more clearly. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 30 years old. His face had strong features, and there was a calmness about him that made her feel safer somehow. The trader gave Catherine a small bundle. "Some dried meat and bread," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. He seemed embarrassed by what he'd witnessed yesterday. "It ain't much, but it'll help for the journey." "Thank you," Catherine said, taking the bundle. It was more kindness than she'd expected. One of the younger Lakota men helped Catherine onto a gentle mare. She'd ridden before back east, but it had been years. The horse shifted beneath her and she gripped the mane nervously. Her name is Morning Star, Mapialuta said, riding up beside her on a beautiful paint horse. She is patient and kind. She will take care of you. They rode out as the sun cleared the horizon, painting the plains in gold and orange. Catherine had seen the grasslands before, but always from a wagon or a settlement. Riding through them like this, she felt how vast the world truly was. The grass stretched endlessly in every direction, rolling like waves on an ocean. The two younger men rode ahead, scouting. Mapialuta stayed near Catherine, not speaking much at first. She was grateful for the silence. Her thoughts were too tangled to make conversation. But as the morning wore on and the rhythm of the horse became familiar, Catherine found herself curious. This man had saved her from a terrible fate, and she knew nothing about him except his name. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. Mapialuta looked over at her. "You may ask. Those horses you traded for me. 3 horses is a lot. How do you have so many horses?" A small smile crossed his face. "I am a horse keeper. Since I was a boy, I understood horses in a way others did not. I can see what they need, what they fear, what they desire. When I find wild horses, I do not break them. I speak to their spirits and they choose to come with me." "You talk to horses?" "In a way, yes. Not with words like we use, but with presence, with patience, with understanding. A horse knows when someone sees them as just a tool, and when someone sees them as a living being with their own thoughts and feelings." Catherine thought about that. "So you have many horses because they want to be with you? Some I trade for. Some I raise from birth. But yes, many choose to stay because they are treated well, fed well, given room to run and be themselves. A happy horse is a loyal horse," he paused. "It is not so different from people, I think." They rode in silence for a while longer. The sun climbed higher and the day grew warm. Catherine's body wasn't used to riding and she could feel herself getting sore. But she didn't complain. Around midday, they stopped near a small creek to rest and water the horses. The two younger men introduced themselves. One was called Ohanzi, which meant shadow, and the other was Chaitin, meaning falcon. They were cousins, both in their early 20s, and they treated Catherine with polite curiosity rather than hostility. As they ate the dried meat and bread, Chaitin asked her, "Have you met Lakota people before?" Catherine shook her head. "No, I've seen some from a distance. In the settlements, they tell stories about—" She stopped, embarrassed. "About how we are violent and dangerous." Ohanzi finished for her, not seeming offended. "They tell those stories because they want our land. It is easier to take land from monsters than from human beings." "My people tell stories too," Mapialuta added, "about how all white people are greedy and cruel and want only to destroy. But stories are just stories. Truth is found in actions, not words." Catherine thought about William, about the men in the trading post who'd watched her being sold and done nothing. Then she thought about Mapialuta, who'd intervened when he didn't have to. "Your English is very good," she said. "All of you speak it well." "Missionaries came to our region when I was young," Mapialuta explained. "They wanted to teach us about their God and their ways. We learned their language. It has been useful for trading, for understanding what the government men are saying when they come with their papers and their promises." "Do you believe in their God?" Catherine asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. But Mapialuta didn't seem bothered. "I believe the Great Spirit shows himself in many ways to many peoples. The missionaries' God and our Wakantanka may not be so different, but their church ways, their rules about who is saved and who is damned." He shook his head. "That I do not understand. The Creator made all things. Why would he hate most of his creation?" Catherine had been raised in the church, had been taught strict rules about heaven and sin and redemption. But sitting here by a creek in the middle of the endless plains, those rules seemed very far away and not very important. They continued riding in the afternoon. The land began to change slightly, with more hills and scattered trees. Catherine's whole body ached now, but she kept going. She wouldn't be a burden to these people who were helping her. As the sun began to lower, Mapialuta pointed toward a line of trees in the distance. "We will camp there tonight. Good shelter, good water." They set up camp as darkness fell. The men built a fire and prepared food. Catherine tried to help, but Chaitin gently waved her away. "You rest tonight. Tomorrow you can help. Tonight your body needs to recover from the riding." She wanted to argue, to prove she could be useful, but honestly, she was exhausted. She sat by the fire wrapped in a blanket they'd given her and watched the flames dance. Mapialuta sat nearby, working on repairing a leather strap. "You are wondering what my village will be like," he said without looking up. "Yes," Catherine admitted. "I'm nervous. That is understandable. You are going to a place where you do not know the customs, do not speak the language well, do not know anyone." He pulled the strap tight, testing its strength. "But I will tell you what to expect so you are less afraid." He explained how the village was arranged in circles, how the teepees were set up, how families lived. He told her about the elder women who would take her in, especially one named Winona, who had lost her daughter many years ago and might welcome another woman to teach and care for. "In our way," Mapialuta said, "women have strong voices. They own their own teepees, their own property. A man cannot tell his wife what to do as if she is a child. Marriage is a partnership. Both have different roles, but both are valued." Catherine found this hard to believe. Women own property? Of course. Why would they not? A woman's work is as important as a man's work. She makes the home, prepares the food, makes the clothing, raises the children. Without women's work, there is no life, no comfort, no future. This deserves respect and recognition. It was so different from everything Catherine had known. In her world, women were property themselves. Everything they owned belonged to their fathers, then their husbands. They had no legal rights, no voice in decisions. "What happened to your wife?" Catherine asked quietly, then immediately wished she hadn't. "I'm sorry. That's too personal. You don't have to answer." Mapialuta was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old grief. "Her name was Mika. She died 2 winters ago, along with our child who was not yet born. The sickness came to our village, the one white people call smallpox. Many died, the old, the young, the strong, the weak. The sickness did not care." "I'm so sorry," Catherine said, and she meant it. She knew that kind of loss. She'd watched her parents die of cholera, helpless to save them. "I did not think I would feel alive again." Mapialuta continued. "For many months I only went through the motions of living. I cared for my horses because they needed me, but inside I felt empty." He looked up at Catherine. "Time does not heal exactly, but it teaches you how to carry the weight better." They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the fire burn low. Ohanzi and Chayton had already rolled into their blankets to sleep. The night air was cool, and the stars above were brighter than Catherine had ever seen them. "Why did you really help me?" Catherine asked. "The truth," Mapialuta considered the question. "Because I remember feeling powerless when Mika was dying. I could do nothing. I could not save her, could not stop the sickness, could not change what was happening. Yesterday, in that trading post, I saw another person suffering, another person powerless, and this time I could do something. So I did." It was the most honest answer Catherine had ever heard. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me as a person worth saving." He met her eyes across the fire. "Every person is worth saving, Catherine. Your husband forgot that, but it does not make it less true." That night, wrapped in borrowed blankets under a sky full of stars, Catherine slept better than she had in years. She dreamed not of the past, but of the future. Of possibility tomorrow they would reach the Lakota village. Tomorrow her new life would truly begin. She didn't know what that life would look like. She didn't know if she would fit in, if she would be accepted, if she would survive. But for the first time since her parents died, Catherine felt like she was moving towards something rather than just running away from something. On the second day of travel, Catherine woke before dawn, her muscles screaming from the previous day's ride. Every part of her body that had touched the saddle was sore. But when Mapialuta offered to let her ride in a travois behind one of the horses, she shook her head. "I can ride," she said stubbornly. "I just need a minute to get moving." He smiled slightly. "Pride is good. But wisdom is knowing when to accept help." "Then I'll be proud today and wise tomorrow," Catherine replied, and was surprised to hear him laugh. The sound was warm and genuine, and it made something flutter in her chest. She pushed the feeling away. This man had saved her life, had shown her kindness when she desperately needed it. She wouldn't complicate that by developing feelings that had nowhere to go. As they rode that day, Catherine found herself talking more. Maybe it was the rhythm of the horse or the endless sky above them, or simply that Mapialuta was easy to talk to. She told him about her life before, about her parents and their dreams of a better life out west. Papa was a carpenter, she said. A good one. He made beautiful furniture, things that would last generations. But the town where we lived, there were too many carpenters and not enough work. Someone told him about the opportunities out west, about land for the taking, about towns being built that would need skilled craftsmen. But he never got to see those towns, Mapialuta said gently. No. The sickness took both him and Mama within days of each other. I was alone, hundreds of miles from anything familiar, with no money and no skills except basic cooking and sewing. Catherine's voice cracked slightly. William seemed like a solution. He promised to take care of me, and maybe in his own way he tried. But he only saw me as useful or not useful. When I couldn't have children after 3 years, I stopped being useful. The fault of no children could have been his, not yours, Mapialuta pointed out. Catherine had never considered that. In her world, barrenness was always the woman's failure, the woman's shame. I never thought, the church always teaches that if a woman can't have children, it's because what? Because some god is punishing her? Mapialuta shook his head. I do not understand this way of thinking. Sometimes children come, sometimes they do not. Sometimes people die young, sometimes they live to be very old. These things happen. They are not punishments or rewards. They simply are. It was such a different way of seeing the world. Catherine had been raised to believe everything happened for a reason, that suffering was either punishment for sin or a test of faith. The idea that things just happened without judgment or meaning was almost frightening in its simplicity. Tell me about Mika, Catherine said, then quickly added, only if you want to. I don't mean to pry. Mapialuta was quiet for so long that Catherine thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, his voice soft with memory. We were married for 5 years. She was fierce and smart, not afraid to speak her mind even to the elders. She made me laugh every day, even when times were hard. She loved horses almost as much as I did. He paused. When the sickness came, she tried to help care for others who were sick. That is how she caught it. She died helping others, which was exactly how she lived. She sounds wonderful. She was, and I thought when she died that I would never feel whole again. That part of me died with her and our child. He glanced at Catherine. I do not know why I am telling you this. I do not usually speak of these things. Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who doesn't know you, Catherine said. Someone who has no expectations of how you should feel or act. Perhaps that is it, Mapialuta agreed. They rode in silence for a while, but it was a comfortable silence. Catherine found herself watching him, noticing little things. The way he sat on his horse as if they were one being. The way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, not with fear but with awareness. The way he spoke to his companions in their language, his voice carrying a natural authority that had nothing to do with force or volume. Around midday, they stopped by a stream. While the horses drank and the men prepared a quick meal, Catherine wandered a short distance away, her legs grateful for the chance to walk. The prairie was beautiful in a way she was only beginning to appreciate. Not the dramatic beauty of mountains or forests, but a subtle beauty in the waving grass, the wildflowers hidden among the stems, the way the wind moved across the land like breath. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Mapialuta approaching. Do not wander too far, he said. There are dangers, I'm sorry. I just needed to stretch my legs. I understand. But here, he gestured to the vast emptiness around them. Here it is easy to feel safe because you can see so far. But distance can be deceiving. And there are those who would see a white woman alone as an opportunity. Catherine's stomach clenched. Like Garrett, he confirmed. Or others. The frontier brings out the best in some people and the worst in many more. They stood together looking out at the plains. Catherine gathered her courage and asked the question that had been bothering her. When we get to your village, what will people think? About you bringing a white woman there? Mapialuta considered this. Some will be curious. Some will be suspicious. White people have brought much pain to our people. Many broken promises, much sickness. But our elders teach us to judge each person by their actions, not by the color of their skin or the language they speak. And if they decide they don't want me there, then I will help you find somewhere safe. But I do not think this will happen. Our people understand what it means to be cast out, to be alone. We do not turn away those who need help. Even when helping might bring trouble, he looked at her with those dark, serious eyes. Doing what is right often brings trouble. That does not make it less right. Catherine felt something shift inside her, a crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. This man, this person she'd been taught to fear and mistrust, was showing her a kind of integrity she'd never encountered before. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Honestly, everything I'd been told said you would be violent, uncivilized, that you would—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "That I would harm you," Mapialuta finished. "Take what I wanted. Act like an animal." There was no anger in his voice, just sadness. "This is what your people tell themselves so they can justify taking our land, killing our people, breaking every promise they make. It is easier to destroy someone if you first convince yourself they are not human." "I'm sorry," Catherine said. "I'm sorry for believing those lies. You are learning the truth now. That is what matters." He turned back toward camp. "Come, we should eat and continue. We will reach my village before dark tomorrow." That afternoon, as they rode, Ohanzi began teaching Catherine some basic Lakota words. How for hello, Pilamaya for thank you, Washti for good. She practiced them, stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds, and the young men good-naturedly corrected her pronunciation. "Your accent is terrible," Chayton said with a grin, "like a baby bird learning to sing." "I'd like to hear you speak English when you were first learning," Catherine shot back, and they all laughed. It felt good to laugh, to joke, to be treated like a normal person, rather than a burden or a possession. Catherine realized that in the 2 days since leaving the trading post, she'd smiled and laughed more than she had in the entire 3 years of her marriage. That evening, they made camp in a small valley with a creek running through it. After they'd eaten, Mapialuta brought out a small wooden flute and began to play. The music was unlike anything Catherine had heard before, haunting and beautiful, full of the loneliness of the prairie and the vastness of the sky. "That's beautiful," she said when he finished. "What was it?" "An old song," he replied, "about a warrior who traveled far from home and wondered if he would ever return. My grandfather taught it to me. Will you teach it to me?" The words were out before Catherine thought about them. Mapialuta looked surprised. "You want to learn our music?" "I want to learn everything," Catherine said honestly. "Your language, your customs, your music. If I'm going to live in your village even for a short time, I want to understand. I want to belong, not just be a stranger taking up space." Something in Mapialuta's expression softened. "Then I will teach you, and others will teach you. We are a people who value knowledge, who share it freely with those who truly want to learn." As Catherine lay down to sleep that night, she thought about how much had changed in just a few days. She'd gone from being someone's possession to being someone's equal, from being valued for what she could provide to being valued simply for being herself. Tomorrow they would reach the village. Tomorrow she would meet the people who might become her new community. She was nervous, scared even, but beneath the fear was something stronger. Excitement, possibility, hope. And as she drifted off to sleep, listening to the night sounds of the prairie and the gentle breathing of the horses nearby, Catherine realized something that took her breath away. For the first time in years, she was happy, not pretending to be happy, not trying to convince herself she should be grateful for what little she had. Actually, genuinely happy. It was the most precious gift anyone had ever given her. The village appeared in the distance like something from a dream. Dozens of teepees arranged in careful circles, their painted surfaces decorated with symbols Catherine didn't yet understand. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and she could hear the sound of children playing, dogs barking, and people calling to one another. Catherine's heart pounded as they rode closer. Every eye in the village seemed to turn toward them. People stopped what they were doing to watch the horsekeeper return with an unexpected guest. Mapialuta raised his hand in greeting, calling out in Lakota. Several men approached, and there was a rapid conversation Catherine couldn't follow. She caught a few words she'd learned, but the rest flowed past her too quickly. An older woman with silver-streaked hair and a face lined with years of laughter and sorrow stepped forward. She looked at Catherine with keen, assessing eyes, then spoke to Mapialuta. He responded, gesturing to Catherine as he spoke. The woman nodded slowly, then walked directly to Catherine's horse. She reached up and touched Catherine's hand, speaking in a gentle voice. Catherine looked to Mapialuta helplessly. "This is Winona," he translated. "She says you have the eyes of someone who has known great sorrow. She says sorrow recognizes sorrow, and you are welcome in her lodge." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Pilamaya, she said, hoping she was saying thank you correctly. Winona's face broke into a warm smile. She patted Catherine's hand and spoke again. She says your accent is terrible, but your heart is good. Mapia Luta translated, with a slight smile. She will teach you to speak properly. Over the next hours, Catherine was introduced to what felt like the entire village. Each person greeted her with curiosity, some with suspicion, but none with open hostility. Children stared at her pale skin and light hair with wide eyes, whispering to each other. She tried to smile at them, and a few brave ones smiled back. Winona's teepee was larger than Catherine expected, made of buffalo hide stretched over wooden poles. Inside it was surprisingly comfortable, with soft furs on the ground and bags of belongings hanging from the poles. A fire pit sat in the center, with a smoke flap at the top that could be adjusted to control the draft. There were 2 other women in Winona's teepee. Cheyenne, a widow about Catherine's age with 3 young children, and Talise, an elderly woman who'd lost most of her sight but whose fingers were still nimble with beadwork. Through a combination of hand gestures, broken Lakota, and Mapia Luta's occasional translation, they made Catherine understand she would sleep here and learn from them. They showed her where to put her few belongings, gave her proper clothing to replace her torn dress, and treated her with a kindness that made her throat tight with emotion. That first night, she lay awake long after the others had fallen asleep, listening to the sounds of the village settling down for the night. Someone was singing somewhere, a mother's lullaby to a child. Dogs barked in the distance. The fire crackled softly. Catherine wondered what William would think if he could see her now. Probably nothing. He'd probably already forgotten she existed. The thought didn't hurt as much as she expected it to. The next morning began before dawn. Winona woke Catherine with a gentle touch and showed her how to rebuild the fire. The older woman moved with the confidence of someone who'd done these tasks thousands of times, and she patiently guided Catherine's clumsy attempts. Cheyenne joined them, her 3 children tumbling out of their sleeping furs like puppies. The youngest, a boy of about 4, stared at Catherine with huge eyes. When she smiled at him, he hid behind his mother's legs. "Washta," Catherine tried, pointing to herself and hoping she was saying something appropriate. Cheyenne laughed, a musical sound, and corrected her pronunciation. They spent the morning working side by side, preparing food, gathering water from the creek, checking snares for rabbits. Catherine watched everything carefully, trying to learn. The work was hard, harder than anything she'd done before. But it was also purposeful. Everyone in the village had a role, work that mattered to the whole community. Catherine began to understand that what Mapia Luta had told her was true. Women here weren't decorations or servants. They were essential members of the community, and their work was valued. Over the following weeks, Catherine threw herself into learning. Winona taught her the language, sitting with her every evening and patiently repeating words until Catherine could pronounce them correctly. Talise taught her beadwork, guiding Catherine's fingers to create patterns that told stories. Cheyenne taught her how to prepare hides, how to make pemmican, how to identify useful plants. The work was endless but satisfying in a way Catherine had never experienced. She fell into bed exhausted every night, her hands rough and sometimes bleeding, but her heart fuller than it had ever been. One afternoon, about a month after her arrival, Catherine was working with Cheyenne to repair a teepee cover when she heard a commotion near the edge of the village. Looking up, she saw Mapia Luta returning with a group of young men, driving a small herd of wild horses before them. She hadn't seen much of him since arriving. He'd checked on her a few times, asking Winona how she was adjusting, but he'd kept his distance. Catherine told herself she was grateful for that. She didn't need complications. She was just beginning to find her footing in this new world. But watching him now, sitting tall on his horse, working with the wild ones with such patience and skill, she felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "He is a good man," Cheyenne said quietly in Lakota. Catherine was surprised she understood the words. "Yes," Catherine agreed. "His heart has been closed since Mika died, like a flower in winter." Cheyenne glanced at Catherine, but maybe spring is coming. Catherine didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. But her eyes kept drifting back to where Mapia Luta worked with the horses. Several days later, Winona announced that Catherine should help with the horses. "You need to learn all the work of our people," the older woman said. "Mapia Luta has agreed to teach you." Catherine's heart jumped. I don't know anything about horses. Not really. Then you will learn, Winona said simply. Go. He is waiting. Catherine found Mapialuta in the area where the horse herd grazed. He smiled when he saw her, a genuine smile that made her stomach flutter. Winona tells me I am to teach you about horses, he said. I'll probably be terrible at it, Catherine warned. Then you will fit well with the horses. They are often terrible at listening too. He gestured for her to follow him. Come, I will show you how to see what they are telling you. Catherine spent the rest of that afternoon learning to read horse behavior. How a flick of an ear meant attention. How a swish of a tail could signal irritation or contentment depending on the context. How a horse's eyes could tell you if it was calm or nervous. Most people try to dominate a horse, Mapialuta explained. They think they must show the horse who is in control, break its spirit so it will obey. But this creates a horse that obeys from fear, not from respect. A fearful horse is dangerous, and how do you do it differently? Catherine asked. I watch, I listen, I learn what each horse needs, and I give it time to learn about me. Some horses are brave and curious. They come close quickly. Others are cautious and need more time. I do not force them. I let them choose. Catherine watched as he approached a young mare who'd been skittish all day. He didn't walk directly toward her. Instead, he angled his approach, not meeting her eyes directly, making himself smaller and less threatening. He spoke softly, not words exactly, but sounds that seemed to carry meaning beyond language. The mare's ears flicked toward him. She took a step back, then stopped. Mapialuta stopped too, giving her time to think. Slowly, so slowly, the mare took a step toward him, then another. When she was close enough, Mapialuta reached out and let her smell his hand. The mare's nose twitched, investigating. Then, miracle of miracles, she let him touch her neck. That's amazing, Catherine breathed. Mapialuta glanced at her, his eyes warm. You can do this too. You have the right spirit for it. I saw it in you that day in the trading post. What did you see? I saw someone who had been treated like an animal, but who never forgot she was human. Someone who had been broken but was not destroyed. Horses understand that. They respond to it. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. She looked away, not sure what to say. From that day on, she spent part of each afternoon with the horses and with Mapialuta. At first, she was awkward, and the horses could sense her nervousness. But gradually, following his patient instruction, she began to understand. She learned to move with confidence but without aggression. She learned to read the subtle signals the horses gave. She learned to trust her instincts, and she learned something else too. She was falling in love with Mapialuta. It happened slowly, like spring coming to the prairie, little things that accumulated over time. The way he spoke to the horses with such respect, the way he listened when she talked, really listened as if her words mattered, the way he smiled when she finally managed to halter a stubborn yearling all by herself, the way his hand felt when it accidentally brushed hers while working. Catherine tried to ignore it. She told herself she was being foolish, that he'd saved her out of kindness and nothing more, that he probably still loved his dead wife and always would. But the heart doesn't always listen to reason. Spring arrived on the plains like a promise kept. The grass turned from brown to green, wildflowers bloomed in unexpected patches of color, and the horse herd grew restless with the energy of the season. Catherine had been living with the Lakota for 6 months now, and the woman who'd arrived frightened and broken was barely recognizable. Her hands were calloused and strong. Her skin had browned from hours in the sun. She could speak Lakota well enough to joke with the children and discuss serious matters with the elders. She could tan a hide, make pemmican that didn't taste like leather, and create beadwork patterns that told simple stories. And she'd fallen completely, hopelessly in love with Mapialuta. She'd tried to fight it, tried to remind herself that he'd saved her out of kindness, nothing more, that he was still grieving his wife, that she was probably just confusing gratitude with deeper feelings. But the heart doesn't negotiate with logic. Every afternoon spent with the horses, working side by side with him, only made her feelings stronger. She loved the way he spoke to the animals with such patience. Loved his laugh when a foal did something particularly silly. Loved the quiet strength in his hands, the wisdom in his eyes, the kindness that seemed to radiate from him like warmth from a fire. But she kept her feelings hidden. She wouldn't burden him with emotions he probably didn't share and couldn't return. The spring gathering of wild horses was approaching, an event that happened every year when the herds were moving to their summer grazing grounds. Mapialuda and several other men would spend weeks tracking the wild herds, carefully selecting young horses to bring back and integrate into the village herd. "You should come," Ohanzi told Catherine one morning as she helped him prepare supplies. "You have learned much. It is time to see how horses behave when they are truly free." Catherine's heart leaped at the thought of spending weeks traveling with the group, but she hesitated. "I don't know if Mapialuda would want me there." Ohanzi gave her a look that suggested she was being deliberately obtuse. "He has already asked Winona if she thought you were ready." She said yes. "So you are coming." Catherine tried to ignore the flutter in her chest at the knowledge that Mapialuda had thought of her, wanted her there. They left 3 days later, a group of 7 including Catherine. Along with Mapialuda and Ohanzi, there was Chaitin, 2 other young men named Lakota and Enepe, and surprisingly, Winona. "Someone needs to make sure you boys don't starve," the old woman said with a grin when Catherine expressed surprise at her presence. "And Catherine needs a chaperone. People talk." Catherine blushed, but she was grateful for Winona's company. They traveled north, following the routes the wild horses traditionally took. Mapialuda was different out here, more relaxed, more openly happy. He told stories as they rode, taught Catherine to read the signs the horses left, showed her how to move with the land rather than against it. On the 4th day, they found the herd. There must have been 200 horses, maybe more, spread across a valley between 2 ridges. Mares with foals, bachelor stallions testing each other's strength, older horses wise and watchful. Catherine had never seen anything so beautiful. "Now we watch," Mapialuda said quietly. "We learn which horses might join us willingly, which ones would be good additions to our herd. This takes time." They spent 3 days observing the herd, moving their camp to follow as the horses grazed. Mapialuda pointed out individuals, explaining what their behavior revealed about their temperament. "That gray mare there, see how she keeps her foal close but doesn't panic when the others play rough nearby? She is calm but protective. Those are good traits. Her foal has inherited them. See how curious it is, but it always checks back with its mother before exploring too far?" Catherine watched, fascinated. She was beginning to see what he saw, to understand the silent language the horses spoke with their bodies, their movements, their interactions with each other. On the 4th day, disaster struck. A young stallion, barely 3 years old and full of foolish courage, broke away from the bachelor group and ran straight toward a ravine, spooked by something only he had seen. The ravine was deep with sharp rocks at the bottom, and the stallion was running blind, driven by panic. Without thinking, Catherine kicked her horse forward. She heard Mapialuda shout behind her, but she didn't stop. She angled to cut off the stallion's path, putting herself between him and danger. As she drew closer, she did something that felt completely natural in the moment. She began to sing. It was an old Irish lullaby her mother had sung to her, the same one she'd sung to herself on lonely nights when she was married to William. Her voice rose clear and strong across the prairie, an alien sound in this vast landscape. The stallion's ears swiveled toward her. His stride faltered, confusion replacing panic. Catherine kept singing, kept riding parallel to him, not chasing but accompanying. Gradually, the young horse slowed, sides heaving, eyes still showing white. Mapialuda appeared on the stallion's other side, his voice joining hers, though he sang in Lakota, a soft song that wove through her melody. Together, they guided the confused stallion away from the ravine back toward safe ground. When the young horse finally stopped, trembling but safe, Catherine stopped singing. Her hands were shaking with leftover adrenaline. She'd just done something incredibly dangerous without thinking about it. Mapialuda rode close, his face showing a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite read. "That was very brave," he said quietly. "And very foolish, I know. I'm sorry. I just saw him running and I couldn't—" Catherine trailed off. "You could not let him hurt himself." Mapialuda's expression softened. "That song. It was beautiful. My mother's lullaby. It just came to me." The horse responded to it, to your voice, your intention. He reached out and touched her hand where it rested on her saddle. "You have a gift, Catherine. A true gift with horses. I suspected it before, but now I know." The touch of his hand on hers sent warmth through Catherine's entire body. She looked into his eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. Before either of them could speak, Ohanzi whooped from where he'd been watching. The white woman tames horses with strange magic songs. This will be a great story. The moment broke and Mapialuda pulled his hand back. But something had shifted between them. Catherine could feel it, electric and terrifying and wonderful all at once. That evening, as they sat around the fire, the group discussed their plan for approaching some of the horses they'd identified. Catherine sat next to Mapialuda, very aware of his presence, of the way his arms sometimes brushed against hers. Winona watched them with knowing eyes and a small smile on her weathered face. Over the next week, they worked to slowly integrate 3 young horses into their group, letting the wild ones get used to human presence without force or fear. Catherine found herself working closely with a young mare, using her voice, her patience, her growing understanding of what the horses needed. The mare, whom Catherine had privately named Dawn for the gray color that reminded her of early morning light, responded to her like they'd always known each other. Within days, Dawn was following Catherine around the camp like a large, devoted dog. She has chosen you, Mapialuda said, watching them together. In our way, this means she is yours. Your horse, your responsibility, your partner. Mine, Catherine was stunned. But I can't. You can. You have earned this. Dawn knows it, even if you do not yet. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. She lay in her bedroll, staring up at the stars, thinking about everything that had changed. A year ago, she'd been married to a man who saw her as property. Now she was sleeping under the stars, owned her own horse, and was part of a community that valued her. She heard quiet footsteps and looked up to see Mapialuda moving away from the camp, probably to check on the horses. Without quite deciding to do it, Catherine got up and followed. She found him standing at the edge of their camp, watching the horse herd silhouetted against the starlit sky. I could not sleep either, he said without turning around. Too much to think about? Catherine asked, coming to stand beside him. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Catherine, I need to tell you something. Her heart began to pound. All right, he turned to face her. When I brought you to our village, I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because you needed help and I could provide it. I had no other thoughts beyond that. Catherine's heart sank. He was going to tell her kindly that she shouldn't hope for anything more. But over these months, he continued, watching you learn, seeing you become part of our community, working with you and the horses, something changed. You changed something in me that I thought was dead. Catherine held her breath. I loved Mika very much. When she died, I thought that part of my heart died too, that I would never feel that way again, and I told myself that was acceptable, that one great love in a lifetime was more than many people got. You don't have to say anything else, Catherine said quietly. I understand. No, please. Let me finish. Mapialuda took a deep breath, but then you came into my life. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, my heart began to wake up again, like spring coming to the prairie after a long winter. You did that, Catherine. Your strength, your kindness. Autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Catherine had been living with the Lakota for nearly 10 months now, and the world she'd left behind felt like a distant dream. Or maybe a nightmare she'd finally woken from. Her relationship with Mapialuda had deepened slowly, carefully, like the roots of a prairie grass growing deep and strong. They spent their days working with the horses together. Their evenings often found them sitting by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, content to be near each other. The village had accepted their growing closeness with approval. Winona practically glowed with satisfaction as if she'd planned the whole thing herself. Even the elders nodded their blessing when Mapialuda formally announced his intention to court Catherine in the traditional way. Catherine had never been so happy. She'd found a home, a purpose, a community, and love. Real honest love with a man who saw her as an equal, who valued her mind as much as her work, who made her laugh and challenged her to grow. She should have known it was too perfect to last. The cavalry patrol arrived on a bright October morning. Catherine was working with Dawn when she heard the commotion. Looking up, she saw a group of uniformed soldiers riding into the village, led by a young lieutenant with sharp features and eyes that took in everything with calculating coldness. Her stomach dropped. She knew why they were here. Mapialuda appeared at her side immediately, his hand touching her back in reassurance. Stay calm. I will handle this. The lieutenant dismounted and approached the group of elders who'd come to greet them. He spoke in rough, broken Lakota, then switched to English when he realized several people understood him. I'm Lieutenant Harrison from Fort Kearney. We've received reports of a white woman being held in this village. I'm here to ensure she's safe and to offer her transport back to civilization. Catherine felt everyone's eyes turn toward her. She stepped forward, head high. I'm Catherine, she said clearly, and I'm not being held. I'm here by choice. Lieutenant Harrison looked her up and down, taking in her Lakota clothing, her braided hair, her tanned skin. His lip curled slightly with distaste. Miss, you're clearly not thinking clearly. Living among these. He gestured vaguely at the people around them. Savages has confused you. I'm here to take you somewhere safe. I am somewhere safe, Catherine said firmly. These people took me in when I had nothing and no one. They've treated me with more kindness and respect than I ever received in white settlements. That's the confusion talking, the lieutenant said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. These Indians have clearly manipulated you. It's not uncommon. We've seen it before. But don't worry, we'll get you back to your own people. Mapialuta stepped forward. She has told you her choice. You should respect it. Harrison barely glanced at him. I don't take orders from Indians, and I don't leave white women in Indian camps. He turned back to Catherine. Ma'am, I'm prepared to offer you transport to Fort Kearney. There's work available there. Respectable work as a laundress or possibly a school teacher. You can rebuild your life properly. Catherine felt something twist inside her. A year ago she would have jumped at such an offer. Work, respectability, a place in the white world. It was everything she'd once wanted, but that was before. Before she'd learned what real respect felt like. Before she'd discovered a community where women had voices and choices. Before she'd fallen in love with a man who saw her as an equal. Thank you for the offer, Lieutenant, she said carefully, but I'm exactly where I choose to be. Harrison's face hardened. Miss, I don't think you understand the position you're in. Living with Indians marks you. Even if you wanted to return to white society later, no decent man would have you. Your reputation is ruined. I'm offering you a chance to salvage something. My reputation? Catherine felt anger rising hot and sharp. My own husband sold me for buffalo meat and whiskey. Where was my reputation then? Where were decent white men when I needed help? These people, she gestured to the Lakota around them, saved me. They gave me dignity when white men saw me as property. Your husband sold you? Harrison looked skeptical. That's not possible. American citizens don't sell women. Well, one did. To a buffalo hunter named Garrett. You can find him if you want confirmation. Catherine's voice was steel now. Mapialuta here paid 3 horses to free me and gave me a choice about my own life. Something no white man ever did. The lieutenant's expression shifted, becoming harder. I see what's happened here. You've been living as this Indian's woman. That makes this even more serious. You've been compromised. Winona stepped forward then, speaking in sharp, clear English that surprised everyone. The girl has been living in my lodge with proper supervision. She has learned our ways with honor. And she has committed no wrongs. Your thoughts are dirty, soldier man. Not hers. Harrison ignored her, keeping his focus on Catherine. Regardless, I have orders to offer any white captive safe passage. That includes you. I have room in my patrol. We leave tomorrow morning. I suggest you pack whatever you need. I'm not a captive, Catherine said through gritted teeth. Then prove it. Come with us willingly. Show that you're making this choice with a clear mind, not under duress or manipulation. Mapialuta moved closer to Catherine. You do not have to go. You owe this man nothing. But Catherine's mind was racing. If she refused, Harrison might report back that she was being held against her will. That could bring more soldiers, bigger problems for the village. These people had given her everything. She wouldn't let her presence bring them harm. I'll go to the fort, she said quietly. She felt Mapialuta stiffen beside her. I'll see what they're offering, and then I'll make my final decision. Catherine, no, Mapialuta said. You do not have to do this. She turned to face him, speaking in Lakota so the soldiers wouldn't understand. If I don't go, he'll make trouble for the village. He'll say I'm being held captive. Better to go willingly, see what he offers, and then return when I choose. This way, no one can say I didn't have options. And if you do not return? His voice was tight with worry. I will return, Catherine said firmly. This is my home. You are my heart. Nothing at that fort will change that. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. What if she got to the fort and realized she'd been fooling herself? What if the pull of her old world was stronger than she thought? What if being back among white people made her remember who she was supposed to be? That evening, the entire village gathered for a meal. It felt like a farewell, even though Catherine insisted she'd be back. Winona held her hands and spoke blessings over her. Cheyenne's children cried, not understanding why she had to leave. Ohanzi and Chayton promised to take care of her horse while she was gone. Mapialuda barely spoke. He sat beside Catherine, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with emotions he was keeping tightly controlled. When the meal ended and people began drifting to their lodges, Catherine and Mapialuda walked to the edge of the village, to the place where the horse herds grazed under the stars. "I wish you would not go," he said finally. "I have to. You know why? I know why. But that does not mean I have to like it." He turned to face her. "Catherine, you know I would never try to hold you here if you truly wanted to leave. If you get to that fort and decide you want that life, I will understand. I will let you go, even though it would break my heart." "I don't want that life," Catherine said, taking his hands. "I want this life. With you, with the horses, with our people. I'm only going so they can see I'm making a free choice, so they can't claim I was coerced or brainwashed. Promises made in darkness are easy," Mapialuda said softly. "Keeping them in daylight is harder. When you are back in your world, surrounded by your people, things may look different." "You're my people now," Catherine insisted. "Am I?" He looked at her intently. "Or am I just a refuge from a bad situation? An escape from a life you didn't want? When faced with a respectable option, will you still choose me?" The question hurt because Catherine could hear the fear beneath it. The fear that she would leave and not come back, that she would choose safety over love, respectability over happiness. "I love you," she said fiercely. "That's not going to change because I sleep in a different place for a few nights." He pulled her close, holding her tight. "I love you too, more than I thought I could love anyone again. That is why I am afraid. I have already lost one love. I do not know if I could survive losing another." They stood there under the stars holding each other, both afraid of what tomorrow would bring. Catherine fell asleep that night in Winona's lodge, but her dreams were troubled. In them, she stood between two worlds, unable to choose, being pulled in both directions until she thought she would be torn in two. She woke before dawn, her heart heavy. In a few hours, she would ride away from everything she'd built here, away from the people who'd become her family, away from the man she loved, and she would face a choice that would determine the rest of her life. Would she choose the world she'd been born into, with all its familiar structures and expectations? The promise of respectability, of fitting in, of being accepted by her own people? Or would she choose the world she'd grown to love with all its challenges and differences? Fort Kearney was everything Catherine had forgotten about white civilization. Ordered, structured, and suffocating. The wooden buildings stood in precise rows. Soldiers marched in formation. Everything had its place, its purpose, its proper way of being done. After 10 months of the organic flow of village life, it felt like being locked in a cage. Lieutenant Harrison arranged for Catherine to stay in a small room near the laundress's quarters. It had 4 walls, a narrow bed, and a tiny window. After sleeping in a teepee where you could see the sky, where smoke rose freely and air flowed, the room felt like a tomb. "The commander's wife will speak with you tomorrow about possible employment," Harrison told her. "In the meantime, you should rest. And Miss Catherine, I'd advise you to seriously consider staying here. Going back to live with Indian Nut," he shook his head. "People will talk. You'll be marked for life." After he left, Catherine sat on the narrow bed and looked around the bare room. This was what she'd left behind. This was the life she was supposed to want. She'd never felt more alone. The next morning, she was summoned to meet Mrs. Colonel Patterson, the commander's wife. The woman was in her 40s, dressed in proper Eastern fashion that looked absurd on the frontier, her hair severely pulled back, her mouth set in permanent disapproval. "So you're the woman who was living with the savages," Mrs. Patterson said without preamble. "Sit down. Let me look at you." Catherine sat, feeling like an animal being evaluated at market. "You're fortunate Lieutenant Harrison found you when he did," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Another few months and you'd have been completely ruined. As it is, we might be able to salvage something." She paused. "Can you read and write?" "Yes, ma'am. My mother taught me." "Good, we need a teacher for the children at the fort. Nothing fancy, just basic reading and numbers. It pays $12 a month plus room and board. You'd be expected to maintain proper standards, of course. Appropriate dress, proper behavior, church on Sundays." Catherine thought about the life being offered. Teaching was respectable work, better than laundering. $12 was more money than she'd ever had control over. A room of her own, regular meals, safety within the fort's walls. It was everything a woman in her position should want. There's also the possibility of marriage, Mrs. Patterson added, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. Several of the soldiers have expressed interest in meeting you. Good men, respectable. A sergeant named Miller, for instance. Widowed, stable income, looking for a wife. With your situation, you shouldn't be too particular. It's more than you could hope for, really. Catherine felt something cold settle in her stomach. My situation? Well, you were living among Indians. Unmarried for nearly a year. Mrs. Patterson's lips pursed. People will assume things, but if you marry quickly to a decent man, we can put all that unpleasantness behind you. Start fresh. I see, Catherine said quietly. I'm not trying to be unkind, dear. I'm being practical. This is your chance to return to civilization, to be part of your own people again. Surely you can see that's where you belong. Catherine looked at this woman with her tight face and her rigid certainty about how the world should be. She thought about Winona, who laughed freely and spoke her mind without fear. About Cheyenne, who raised 3 children and still found joy in each day. About the elder women who sat in councils and were listened to with respect. May I have some time to think about it? Catherine asked. Mrs. Patterson frowned. What is there to think about? Unless, her eyes narrowed. You're not considering going back to those Indians, are you? After we've offered you this opportunity? I just need a day or two to consider everything, Catherine said diplomatically. Very well. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come often for women in your position. Catherine spent the rest of that day walking around the fort, observing life there. She watched the laundresses working, their hands red and raw from lye soap, their faces lined with exhaustion. She saw the officers' wives gossiping in tight groups, their conversation all about who wore what, and who said something inappropriate at the last dinner. She listened to a soldier complain about his wife, calling her stupid for burning his dinner, speaking about her like she was a disobedient servant rather than a partner. She watched everything and felt nothing but a growing certainty. This wasn't her world anymore. Maybe it never had been. That night, lying in the narrow bed, Catherine finally let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from relief. She'd needed to come here to know for sure, to see the life she'd thought she wanted and recognize it for what it was. A cage painted to look like safety. At dawn, she made her decision. Catherine found Lieutenant Harrison at breakfast and informed him she was leaving. Thank you for bringing me here and for the opportunity to see what was available. But I'm returning to the Lakota village. His face hardened. You're making a mistake. A serious one. Maybe, Catherine said. But it's my mistake to make. I'm a free woman, Lieutenant. You said so yourself. And I'm choosing to go back. They won't accept you in white society after this. You understand that, don't you? You'll be considered a squaw woman. Worse than an Indian yourself. Catherine felt anger rise but kept her voice calm. Then I'm glad I won't be living in white society. Please tell Mrs. Patterson I appreciate her offer, but I must decline. She borrowed a horse from the fort stables, promising to return it within the week, and rode out as the sun cleared the horizon. Her heart felt lighter with every mile she put between herself and Fort Kearney. The 3-day journey back to the village gave Catherine time to think about what she wanted to say to Mapialuta. She'd left him with doubt, with fear that she wouldn't return. She needed to make him understand that her choice was real, permanent, unshakable. She arrived at the village in late afternoon. Children saw her first and ran shouting through the camp. By the time Catherine dismounted, a crowd had gathered. Winona pushed through them, tears streaming down her weathered face. You came back. I knew you would, but still my heart worried. I'm home, Catherine said simply and realized how true it was. This was home, not a place she was visiting or surviving in, but truly home. Where is Mapialuta? She asked. With the horses, Ohanzi said, grinning. Where he has been every day since you left, working until he falls down tired so he does not have to think. Catherine found him at the far edge of the grazing area, working with a young stallion. He had his back to her, hadn't heard her approach over the sound of the wind and the horses. She stopped and just watched him for a moment. This man who had saved her, taught her, loved her. This man who had given her freedom when everyone else wanted to control her. As if sensing her presence, he turned. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the distance. Then Mapialuta was moving, walking toward her, then running. Catherine ran too, and they met in the middle of the prairie with the horse herd around them and the endless sky above. He caught her up in his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You came back. You really came back." "Of course I came back," Catherine said, tears flowing freely. "I told you I would. I was afraid. Every day I was so afraid you would decide to stay." Catherine pulled back enough to look into his face. "I need to tell you something. I needed to go to that fort. I needed to see what that life was like, what was being offered. Because without seeing it, I might have always wondered." Mapialuta nodded, his jaw tight. And I saw it. I saw the rooms like boxes and the rules like chains and the way women are treated like children or servants. I saw respectability that meant making yourself small and quiet and obedient. I saw safety that looked like a cage. She took his face in her hands, and I knew with absolute certainty that I would rather have one day of freedom with you than a lifetime of that kind of safety. "Catherine," he breathed. "I love you," she said fiercely. "Not because you saved me, though you did. Not because you're convenient or safe, though you've given me safety. I love you because you see me as a whole person. Because you've never tried to make me smaller or quieter or different than I am. Because being with you feels like breathing after holding my breath my whole life." Mapialuta kissed her then, deep and long and full of all the fear and relief and love he'd been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "I have something to ask you," he said, taking her hands. "I was going to wait to give you more time. But I do not want to wait anymore. I have spent too much of my life waiting, being careful, protecting my heart. No more." He looked around at the vast herd of horses grazing peacefully, at the rolling prairie stretching to the horizon, at the sky that seemed to go on forever. "All of this," he gestured to the horses, "represents my wealth. In our way, a man with many horses is considered rich. I have more horses than almost anyone in our nation. People call me the Horse Lord because of this wealth." "I know," Catherine said, not sure where he was going with this. "But all of this means nothing if I have no one to share it with. Horses are wonderful, but they cannot hold you at night. They cannot make you laugh. They cannot be your partner in life." He squeezed her hands. "Catherine, I want to offer you something. Not my wealth, though that would be yours too. Not ownership because you belong only to yourself.